Okay, so the two particular groups were workers and farmers. And I said that in your textbook it kind of interweaved the two groups, but I de-wove them, and we focused on the workers last time. And so you should have a pretty good picture of how workers were affected during this time period. Today, we're going to flip over to the farmers. So our theme is farmers, farmers, farmers. Okay? So we start off with the concept of how a farm became a factory. And what I mean by this, it's kind of, it's not obviously a true manufacturing factory, but why it is factory-like is that we are going to reduce the amount of labor and we are going to increase the production. And the thing that is going to reduce the amount of labor and increase the production will be the same as in factories. Technology. So a technology thing, in effect, almost factorizes farming. But this increase of production will actually have an adverse effect on many, many farmers. And so the subtopic here is that in this particular era, it kind of sucked to be a farmer, okay? Because forever, let me just put it this way. How would you measure a good farmer? What would be, if you were to describe for me what a successful farmer was, what would be your definition of a successful farmer? Makes a lot of money. Okay, so you're a modern farmer. Okay, but how would a farmer kind of measure kind of their own success? Well, so money's cool. I get it. All right, but what would they say?
Maybe by how many crops they produce,
Yeah. I made things grow. Look at me. I made stuff appear out of the earth for my neighbor. Look what I did here. Aren't I awesome? Okay. And so this idea of in the past, you're successful by growing stuff, and then that usually in the past achieved what Moriel told us. That's how you made your money. Okay? That a successful farmer who makes stuff grow just naturally would be rewarded with making cash. Okay? Well, in the post-Civil War era, particularly in the West, okay, and in the West we could go basically really anything west of the Appalachian Mountains and maybe north of Missouri. And basically this entire area, considered the West, was a hugely, 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 hugely productive area. But what it produced was extraordinarily limited. Pretty much in most of that area, farmers farmed either wheat or corn, or sometimes they changed it up a little bit and they farmed either corn or wheat. Okay? Now, we've talked about other kind of societies that were kind of one-thing societies. how successful were kind of one-thing societies? Ireland, a one-thing society. How'd that work out for them? Yeah. Okay. The South, a kind of a one-thing society. How'd that work out for them? Did it help them during the Civil War? Okay. And so this kind of, the answer is almost right here. That they become dependent on kind of this one thing, grain. Two different ways of getting there, but it's grain. The other thing about the farming and this factoryization, I'm going to use it. The factoryization of farming is that it basically transforms into big businesses. Big businesses because in order to be successful versus the other farmers, you had to invest heavily in the new labor-saving devices of the era. Combines, which combined several of the tasks that you did during your harvesting into one mechanical device. Mechanical harvesters, mechanical reapers, John Deere plows, okay? All things that were labor-saving, making it so that you had to utilize less labor and you got more results. But even though you might be saving on labor, you were having to pour a lot, and just in case you did not understand me, a lot of resources up front to buy the equipment. In fact, so much of this equipment was so expensive that you're going to have to mortgage your farm in order to pay for it. Now, the way that you thought that this was going to work out is you put the money up front, you perform awesome farmerness, you grow the stuff, okay, and then you have an amazing harvest, you make the money, and you pay off the bills. The problem is that when you produced so much, is you went up a league. Okay? So anybody who's, been in any sort of organized sport or anything like that, the minor leagues, they're, you can be pretty successful there and not be as awesome, right? But once you get to the higher leagues, what is your level of awesomeness have to start becoming? You got to perform even better to be able to play up with the big boys, okay, or the big gals. And what happens with the farmers is that instead of competing in their local markets or even their town markets or even their state markets, they're now in the world markets. They are competing against farmers in France. They're competing across the world, and is this easy stuff? Are you now basically having to know international markets as far as selling your goods? Yeah. And so what happens is America is going to become like the breadbasket of the world, but the fact that we're in the world, many farmers find that as amazing and awesome and special as they were as farmers, they were not good business people. Think skill sets. Have you ever, sometimes this happens in school. I'm sure it doesn't happen to any of you. But that in certain classes you go ding, 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 I know this! And then other classes, what the blank is going on? Okay? Both are doable, okay? But there are some areas that you just like are happy. I love this, and then others, oh, please make it stop. What basically happens is that you're really good. You're really good at that one thing, but you might not be as good at the other. And the fact that you're having to do this other thing now in the big leagues, are you necessarily going to be as successful as you had been back when the competition was different? And what happens is many of these farmers are going to end up failing, okay? Being driven out of farming. Not because they weren't good farmers. Not because they couldn't do the basic farming thing, growing stuff, making stuff, but because they couldn't handle the business side of the equation. So now, let's try and get in the mind of one of these farmers, okay? I'm Joe Farmer, and I grew a whole bunch of stuff. Yet, I'm in serious debt, and I'm in danger of losing my farm. Does that make sense to me? I grew a whole bunch of things. I was incredibly successful as far as the growing side of my game. Do I feel it's my fault that I am so much in debt? No, I farmed. I grew stuff. Somebody else must be to blame. And there's lots of candidates as to who to blame. First of all, many of these farmers blame deflation. And there's some truth to this, I'll tell you. Because during this era, we had what was known as deflation. And I gave you this phrase before, right? Deflation dooms a debtor.
Yeah.
So if I borrowed heavily in order to get all the equipment and stuff like that to do my farming, right? I did all this borrowing. You know, and I go, okay, bank, here you go. I borrowed the money. Okay? Now I'm going to go work and farm. Well, during deflation, I'm working, what's happening to my debt because of the deflation? What's that?
Bigger.
It's getting bigger. Am I borrowing anymore at that point? No. But because of deflation, effectively, the amount that I am borrowing is growing. And I'm working real hard. I'm growing all my food and everything like that, but my debt is getting bigger and bigger because the economic condition of the day is deflation. So it's not my fault. I'm a good farmer. It's the deflation. The banks. So that I borrowed from the bank, right? And is the bank making a ton of money just by the fact that I have that debt in their bank? I mean, that money, that debt's growing, right? So they should be making plenty of money just by the fact that I have I'm borrowing from them. But you know what they had the temerity to do? You know what they're doing besides just simply having this debt? You know what they're charging me? Interest. I mean, here it is, my debt is just getting bigger, and which means that they're getting more money back, and then what they're charging me interest on top of that? Have they no soul? It's not my fault that we're in deflation, and that deflation means that I'm barely keeping up with my just principal payments. And so what's happening is the interest payments on my debts, what's happening to them? If I'm only barely keeping up on principal payments, what's happening to my interest payments? Okay. It's the banks. Grain elevator operators. Well, now that we are in the international marketplace, we have to start marketing our goods all across the world, which means that we're going to have to start storing our grain, waiting for the prices to be better before we sell. Now, grain, you can't just have it sitting around on the ground. If you have it sitting around on the ground, then vermin get in, they poop in it and everything like that. Nobody wants to buy poop-filled grain. So, in order to try and cut down on that, you elevate it. You get it off the ground. You make it safer that way. But if everybody's bringing in these giant harvests, the grain elevators were huge. They were giant contraption things, and they were very expensive to operate. And so usually in your town, there's only going to be one big grain elevator dealing with all the farmers around there. Now, if there's only one, what can they charge? Anything they want, because there's no competition. And so here I am. I'm barely keeping up on these on the principal payment on my debt, and then the banks are charging interest on top of it. And then who's gouging me? Okay, as far as the cost of storing my grain? Grain elevator operators. And then you know what? Government. You know, to get that grain elevator here in my town, you know what they did? Is they gave that company a tax break in order to locate themselves in our town. Now I understand it was important to get it here, but they have to pay no taxes. So who has to pay higher taxes to continue to support the town? I do. I'm barely making it, and they're making money hand over fist as they gouge me with that price. And how much do they pay on all that money? Whole lot of nada. And how much am I paying? Grain elevator operators, the government. And then finally, if I really were trying to find chief villain number one, the railroads. Now to get my stuff to market, okay, I live in Iowa. And if I want to get my stuff to market, I got to transport it. Now going through my county, one set of rails. Now if there's only one set of rails going through my town, okay, is there competition? No. Okay. So this is what the railroads do. Over in New York City, there are a whole bunch of rails all crossing and everything like that. All this competition, stuff like that. And so there, where do you want what do you want the price to be for to transport goods if you got all this competition? You want it to be cheap. And then out here in Iowa, we have only one set of rails. So if I have lowered my price over there in New York City because I have so much competition, how am I going to make the money?
Raise your price in Iowa.
I increase it over here. Well, you know, so here's what happens. Me, the farmer who's barely making it, is paying higher amounts to ship my goods than J.D. Rockefeller. J.D. Rockefeller, who's got more money than God, he can transport his stuff, okay, on the cheap. And the farmers even know that the railroads were even giving him a special deal on top of it. Well, can you see this? That that a farmer who's growing things really well, why would they would think that their lot in life, their plight as they called it, is not their fault. These other things. Because I'm a good farmer. Get it? And so, what farmers initially did is what good Americans do, okay? And even probably that student that's having trouble in that in that class that's not quite their skill set. What do? You work harder. Because that's who you are. I'm going to work harder. Well, for the farmers, and probably for the student too, the working harder backfires. For the student, the working harder in that class then affects the classes that they're good at. Okay? For the farmer, it's even sadder than that. When they increase their production to make more money, they add more product to the marketplace, and what happens to the price of the goods that they're selling? It goes down. Their extra success in their eyes leads to increased failure. Okay, have I proved my theorem? It sucks to be a farmer. Or is that a thesis? It's probably a thesis. So the farmers, the rural people, start basically discovering that their problems were similar to that of the individual worker. An individual worker up against the giant corporation, are they, can they take them on alone, or what do they have to do? They have to form unions. The farmer basically realizes that a similar thing has to happen for them to be able to take on railroads and grain elevator operators and state governments. What they need to do is they need to organize. And so, led by a guy by the name of Oliver Kelly, in 1867, farmers start forming farmer clubs known as the National Grange of the Patrons of Husbandry. Yes, that was their name. We called them, okay, and we called them this before the Harry Potter series, the Grangers. Okay, they are not named after Hermione. So, Oliver Kelly. Oliver Kelly was a Mason, and what he discovered in Mason, in being a Mason, is that one of the ways that you can get people to want to join into a group is make the group cool. And so he starts adding like cool factor things to his farmer club. We're gonna have a secret handshake. We're gonna have a hierarchy. You work your way up to being Chief Awesome Granger, and so you build, you build in these things to make it a cool thing to be a part of. You then start basically getting people together in social events. Now, this was not easy. The natural tendency of a farmer is to be individual, me against the land. If you've ever read any books in the Little House in the Prairie series, Pa Ingalls. If somebody started to build like a farm like on the horizon where he could see it, what did Pa Ingalls want to do? Move. He was feeling all crowded in. So it's an individual nature of a farmer. And so what Oliver Kelly and the Grangers are trying to do is break down that individualism by having, dances and fraternal meetings, make it so that it's okay to be part of a group. By the mid-1870s, at an S, the Grange had grown to a membership of about 1.5 million. Pretty good for a bunch of individuals. They will start forming what we call economic cooperatives. This is the real power of this organization. As a farmer, you as the individual would buy all the equipment you need for your farm, and then you would enter the marketplace and you'd be competing against all the other farmers in your area. The problem is the more people in the marketplace, what happens to the price of the goods? It goes down. So what the farmers do in these granges is they basically start figuring out does every single farmer in this county need their own harvester, reaper, combine, plow? Does everybody have to have every single thing? Or can we all join in, okay, determine how many we need as a group and then share them? And then if we buy fewer than the number of farmers there are, what have we done? We've saved money. You've saved on production. And if you save on production, that's one way of increasing possible profits, right? The second thing that the Grangers would do is that rather than entering the marketplace as individuals, so we're all, like all 40 of us, if we all go running in to sell all at the same time, who are we competing against? Each other. So what we do is go, all right, let's put all of our stuff into one pile and then enter the market as a whole. Well, what you've done is by reducing the number of players in the marketplace, you have reduced competition, and thus what have you likely done to the price of your grain? You've raised it. Does that make sense? And so by lowering the cost and increasing the possible sale of your grain, you're possibly now, possibly eking out a wee bit of a profit. Got it? The other thing the Grangers did is they are going to cooperate with a what was known as the Greenback Labor Party. Okay? We've met the Greenback Labor Party. Way back when I talked about President Grant and when he vetoed a greenback bill and basically put us on the gold standard, the Greenback Labor Party had been formed as a party that was in favor of inflation, printing money, to put more money into circulation. Well, right off the bat, is there a commonality between Greenback Labor and a problem that the farmers have? What was one problem that faced the farmers? Deflation. And what does the Greenback Labor Party want? Inflation. And why is inflation good for these farmers? What does inflation do? Yeah.
Makes debt grow smaller.
It makes the debt grow smaller. You're paying back your debt with cheaper money. Inflation, as bad as it is for people who actually have money, is good for people who borrow, because you're paying it back with cheaper money. So these two groups are uniting on the inflation issue. So they also unite to basically pass what we call Granger laws. Okay? What the Granger laws are is a set of laws that are passed at the state level, where a particular state, like Indiana or Illinois, will say to a railroad, you can't charge so much, stop. To a grain elevator corporation, stop gouging those farmers. We're putting a limitation on you. And so it's a state limitation, a state regulation of the principal enemies of the farmer, the railroads and the grain elevators. Well, the 1870s, this is kind of the heyday of the Grangers. In the 1870s, these regulations were considered legal. The United States Supreme Court had upheld them in a case called Munn versus Illinois. It's a case we talked about earlier. But in the 1880s, the court revisits the Granger laws. In the 1880s, in a case called Wabash versus Illinois, the United States Supreme Court kind of overturns itself, but more, probably more correctly stated here, clarifies. What it does is it says that yes, you as a state have the power to regulate, except you do not have the power to regulate over state lines. if the company you are regulating, in effect, is a multi-state corporation, you can't do it. And what type of organization naturally cross state lines? Railroads. And so, particularly regarding the railroads, the United States Supreme Court says you cannot have a law in Illinois that regulates a railroad. The only entity that has said power is the federal government. Does that make sense? So this case is huge. It crushes many of the Granger laws, particularly the ones aimed at the railroads. All right, so very quickly, I want to make sure I give you plenty of time to write later. So right now, just very, very quickly jot down what's a problem, what would be some similar problems facing both workers and farmers. And my main goal here is, remember how last time I talked about workers, now I'm talking about farmers. I want you to put them together real quick for me. What would be some similar problems that they had? Okay, so let's see if we can handle this with volunteers. This is a non-volunteer class, but let's see if we can do better than a non-volunteer class. What were some problems that faced both workers and yes?
They both worked really hard, but still didn't earn that much money.
They both worked really hard, didn't earn very much money. Excellent. Okay. What would be another problem that they face? Yeah.
Debt that they can pay off.
Yeah, they could all both be in some sort of debt. Yes.
They could gain leverage without unionizing.
They couldn't gain leverage without unionizing. Let's use a clarifying word there, because both of them didn't technically unionize, but both of them did something else, organized. Okay, so you're absolutely spot on as far as the concept, but you might want to use the word organization, because one technically organized Granges, the others organized unions. Okay, yeah.
Both the groups were susceptible to the booms and busts of their industry if a crop yield failed or if goods were no longer wanted.
Yeah. Booms and bust cycle hit them both extraordinarily. Okay, I think y'all very good.
They
Yes.
suffered because of corporations.
Suffered because So is that what I have to do? Is always say that no, I doubt that you'll be able to give me answers, and then you'll all give me answers. Okay. Anyway, so one of the things that I ask you to demonstrate in short answer is making sure that you can figure out give logical answers. So let's kind of go with a kind of logic thing here. If you now can no longer control these companies at a state level, what do you now have to do? Where do you have to go? What's the next step?
Federal.
Yeah. So the next logical step is that, hey, I was doing it local, and local was working, but because the United States Supreme Court said Granger laws, at least in interstate corporations, can't be done anymore, that you now have to do it at the federal level. And so what starts to happen is farmers start consolidating into alliances. So you have your local group, I have my local group. We both want the same thing, farmer rights. Hey, let's be friends. Let's talk. Let's communicate. But we're talking and communicating not at a little local level. We're doing it at a bigger level. We're going after federal government. We call this the farmers' alliances, and they basically take up the cause of both the farmers and the greenbacks. And in 1890, we see some immediate results. In the election of 1890, over 50 Farmers Alliance people, or people who were sympathetic to the Farmers Alliance, were elected to Congress. So now in Congress, you have a group of people that is pro-farmer. We love farmers, so yes we do. We love farmers, how about you? Okay, so you have these pro-farmer people in there, and 50, it's not a majority or anything, but it's a pretty solid group that can maybe block legislation or help somebody get legislation passed. Yeah. So it's a power group. Now, how they got these groups together was through several different organization techniques, but the one we find most notable was a group known as the Calamity Howlers. No, that's not something that Ron Weasley receives via owl from his mom. Okay. A calamity howler. Okay. A calamity. What's a calamity? A disaster. Okay. And when you're howling, what do you? We would say in Ireland, the banshees howl. What howling? Is it quiet? Are you quiet about it? Is it a whisper? Oh, you let people know. So one of the best of these calamity howlers was a woman by the name of Mary Elizabeth Lease. She went by the nickname Mary Yellen. Okay, you getting the picture here? Okay. And what she would do is denounce the government's favoritism toward corporations, the poor treatment of the farmers. Her catchphrase was, "It's time for you farmers to raise less corn and more hay." And basically, she gets these people to form these organizations, these alliances, which in effect will, at the federal level, start to demand federal regulation, since state regulation had been blocked by the court. Got it? And one more time, evidence. The state regulation being blocked by the court. How? What was it that was blocking? What was the thing that blocked? What was the case? Wabash versus Illinois. Okay. So, and so again, the key to the kingdom on success on short answer is making sure that you make a supposition like this. Okay. Then what is it the evidence? What's the thing that actually means that's true? Got it? All right. Are you with me so far? We're all caught up? Okay, so bring it on home. The power of the farmers in Congress will bear fruit. They will force President Grover Cleveland and the Congress to take action. Yeah.
Isn't 1887 before they all got elected?
That's the big year was 1890 as the evidence of their power, but they already, even before then, had got, via the organization, had gotten things out there, okay? In 1887, the United States Congress will pass what is known as the Interstate Commerce Act. It creates what is known as the Interstate Commerce Commission, or the ICC. The Interstate Commerce Commission, or the ICC. The Interstate Commerce Commission, or the ICC. Now, what the Interstate Commerce Act demanded is that railroads now have to publish their rates openly. They can't have secret, we'll tell you when you're standing in front of us, rates. We can't have like okay, I have 2 rates. Okay, who are you? Oh, you're a farmer? You get the farmer rate. Industrialist? Shh. You get the industrialist rate. Okay? You can't have like secrets. Your rate is your rate is your rate. The other thing that the ICC could do is that if it saw a railroad charging too much, or what the commission believed they were charging too much, they had the power to sue. You're charging too much? Let's go to court. Now, let's take a look at that power, and I want you to give it 2 different looks. Look 1 is there actually an attempt by the federal government to do something? Yes. There is an attempt here. And we believe that this is the first large-scale attempt of the United States government to actually regulate big business in the interest of society. Basically, think of regulations, think of the Affordable Care Act, okay? The precedent for that type of regulation is the Interstate Commerce Act. It is the grandmother of all regulation, okay? Of all large regulation of an industry. But beyond that, the Interstate Commerce Act and the Interstate Commerce, the ICC's power isn't actually that awesome of a power. If you were like designing a superhero, would the first power you gave that superhero? I give you the power to sue. In suing, do they get the ultimate call? Who gets the call? Judges do. So basically, what the Interstate Commerce Act can do is say, I spy a high railroad rate. Judges, do you agree? And what, of course, if you're giving somebody else the power to agree or disagree, you're definitely given the power to do what? Disagree. So, yes, it was an attempt. My opinion is it's not that powerful of a power. I would have loved that's too high, crush power. They didn't get that. Okay? All right. How do we feel? Awesome? Or awesomer? Awesomest? Woo! awesomeness out there.
Show us. Show us.
Everything is awesome. Everything is